Well, I want to welcome everyone to Second Life tonight and thank you for being here and pulling yourself out of the gorgeous weather to come to class. I appreciate that. Um, Amanda was just telling us this horror story about having her three dogwoods in full bloom, 8 foot tall trees stolen from her property. So, in the middle of the night, it's kind of one of those unbelievable stories. So, if any of you uh, see a truck driving around with 8 foot tall trees in the back, take down the license plate number because Amanda will be interested in talking to them. At least the police would be interested in doing that. Um, Tonight, I really want to talk about and start talking about writing and argument and getting started. But I was sitting at my desk here tonight, and I have this Monty Python argument sketch. And I don't know how many of you know who Monty Python is, but he's done some really outrageous comedy routines. And he used to have this comedy routine about argument. And you could go into this office and you could buy the 5 minute argument, or you could buy the half-hour argument. And you could argue with somebody for 5 minutes or a half hour. And they were hilarious. And if I'd had this earlier, I would have asked somebody to take one of the parts. But I just have to read this to you because it fits what we're working on. And I just really thought it was a light touch to start the night. It starts out as about the conversation is between a man and another man called Mr. Vibrating. Starts out with the man. Says, "Oh, look, this isn't an argument." "Yes, it is." "No, it isn't. It's just contradiction." "No, it isn't." "It is." "It is not." "Look, you just contradicted me." "I did not." "Oh, you did." "No, no, no. You did just then." "Nonsense." "Oh, this is futile." "No, it isn't. An argument isn't contradiction." "It can be." "No, it can't. An argument is a connected series of statements intended to establish a proposition." "No, it isn't." "Yes, it is. It's not just contradiction. Look, if I argue with you, I must take up a contrary position." "Yes, but that's not saying no, it isn't." "Yes, it is." "No, it isn't." Argument is an intellectual process. Contradiction is just the automatic gainsaying of any statement the other person makes. "No, it isn't." And I just love that uh, sketch because it's just crazy as Monty Python is, and you can actually find the sketch and listen to it. So, are we having trouble hearing me tonight? Check that out. Oh, great. Yes, it is like it's on Who's on First Conversation. You're absolutely right, Amanda. Um, and they actually have YouTubes of him and the secretary having this argument back and forth. But so it's pretty cute. Um, Tonight, I just want to talk for a moment about kind of review our overall goal here. And because we've been doing a lot with VTS, which is very important, but I was just thinking about the best way I have of talking to people about what we do. And I was thinking, when you see a parent asking a child to use their words, they're hoping that child becomes an adult who, instead of getting into a shouting match over an issue, goes for understanding and possibly considering their take on the subject. So, at the Thanksgiving dinner, instead of having a shouting match with Uncle Albert, they uh, they take the higher road and listen carefully and possibly reconsider their take on the subject. This would be such an amazing world if we all had that skill and talent and had the ability to focus on it in heated moments. Our world is increasingly divided, and developing skills for argumentation really is critical for a robust democratic society. And we hear that all the time, but it is so true. And the Common Core, where argument is considered kind of fundamental in all areas of study, places the responsibility for teaching these skills kind of squarely on our shoulders. It's a big job and a huge responsibility. And I think it's reinforced at home, and a lot of kids come from homes where reasoning and argumentation is just a part of their daily conversation, but not for many children. And some of us, including myself, didn't have any kind of formal training in argumentation until high school or maybe college. And and I don't think it became a huge focus in public education until the 50s, when we were in the space race and everybody wanted science to be the focus of all of our teaching, so we could catch up. Uh, and so I think people who study rhetoric and were studying rhetoric about then really came on strong with teaching how to teach argument in public school. And then it kind of comes and goes. But I was kind of curious about the history of argument and the study of informal argument. And it can actually be traced back to the beginning it can be traced back to ancient Greece, 600 BC, when itinerant teachers taught Athenians how to argue in court to recover property and land. Um, so I thought that was pretty interesting. And then over time, there have been a lot of different philosophers, and like Descartes and different people that have contributed to defining, what argument is. Um, and it's still a pretty exciting, I think today, a real vibrant study because we just have this renewed understanding of rhetoric, and more than ever, with our world becoming smaller and smaller, recognize the need for teaching and for our children to be able to think about their thinking and then make that thinking visible in writing. And it's pretty heady stuff. Um, and I think Philip Yenewine's 3 questions making explicit the way we think about art. They align beautifully with the metacognition of argument. And so it was like when I saw those 2 things come together, if somebody had been playing music behind me, it would have been the Hallelujah chorus, because it was just like this perfect collision of art and argument. I think kind of the interesting thing about art is that it does not pass judgment on the observer. It does, however, invite the observer to bring their story to the image and take a risk that things could be otherwise. And argument is about understanding, not agreement. And it requires both parties to suspend judgment and listen carefully to what the other person with the opposing view is willing to share, risking a shift in their view of the world. Every argument inherently holds uncertainty. We can safely say, for the most part, that for most of us, entering an argument is an act of bravery. And I think that is so true. We like to spend most of our time with people who think the same way we do and feel about the world the same way we do. So to enter an argument takes a lot of courage. And it's giving the kids the skills to find the courage to do that. And I think VTS is actually the secret to that. And it challenges us to think about our thinking. It challenges us to make that thinking visible through text. And claims are everywhere. Honestly, you can't walk down the sidewalk without tripping over a claim. And argument is pervasive in our daily life. And tonight we're going to take a look at claims. I think when we want kids to look at argument and to argue, that we need to help them explore their passions. And because I think even the most disengaged student is passionate about something. And if they can dig around in their hearts and minds to see what they care about and what they know about and what they have to share with others. And I think when we think about this, it sounds a lot like BTS. And an argument has some, I think we have to always remember that an argument requires a conversation where 2 people are thinking mutually exclusive positions. This will, and willing to resolve their differences and to convince each other, but at the same time, they themselves are open to influence. So I want to convince you of my position, but I'm open to you influencing how I think about that. And if we can do that, we can have an argument. Without that agreement, an argument cannot happen. So if you want to think about arguments, things that people are very hot over, and are refusing to think there could be another possibility are not the things that you can argue about. I would not, what immediately comes to mind is things that are faith-based and things that have just very, very strong opinions about and feelings about. So for me, the magic and the argument begins with VTS, and it's critical for building the metacognition. And I think when you work with your students on VTS and you've been working with them, it was important, and it still is important, that you're clear to your students that what they're practicing with VTS, what it will accomplish, and that by practicing these 3 questions and these skills, you're helping them to become the person they want to be. In my career, I have seen many, many, many things come and go in education, and most of them, I think, go because they don't have a good foundation, like they're not connected to how we think and who we are. And I've never had an opportunity to really internalize. When I can, they stay. And so without VTS, I'm not sure, but what a lot of our efforts in argumentation might just be kind of flashes in the pan. I still marvel that 10 lessons is all it takes. 10 kind of really clear VTS lessons, and students understand and are pretty clear about reasoning, and which I think is really magic. And that is spoken from my soapbox, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, the next thing I want to say, and I think it's important when you do this, is to buy or help your students make a journal to keep all good things they learn from art and argument. They can record everything they do, and that has to do with argument. It's a place to record claims. It's a place to put down the kinds of things you do with your students to start the day. And if a student has like an argument journal, they can take it to every single class, because every class asks them, and argumentation is supposed to be and should be a part of every class that they attend, which means that they should be able to write down the kinds of things, the claims they're making, or their really strong statements about what they believe, which is kind of cool. And I've said this before, and I'll just say it again. I just think it would be so wonderful if I could sit down today and look back at what I really believed was strong statements and the things I believed strongly when I was in high school and younger, and even in college. Because we changed so much. But the journal is also a cool place to store things, like this particular flow chart that shows how the VTS questions relate to argumentation. If kids had that, they could paste it in the front of their book, their journal, they could staple it onto their journal. And there are all kinds of word charts that I'm going to be passing out, sending you some word charts in the mail and some other things that you can share with your students, and to help them write good claims and stronger arguments. I want to do some exercises with you. I thought it would be kind of fun to do some things tonight that would be that you could ask your students to do, and to help us discover their passions and develop their claims list. So if you could just grab a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, we're going to do a little writing. This activity, called Scavenger Hunt for Passion, says that and it comes from the National Writing Project. This talks about spending just a few minutes closely examining the stuff of our lives can reveal our passions. And it comes from Falling in Love with Close Reading. The scavenger hunt takes students through their belongings, a way to uncover where their hearts are. So let's give it a try. So ask your students to grab their journal or notebook and choose a few of the following locations: their backpack, locker, car, phone, camera roll, their calendar or planner. And in their notebooks, and you can do this on your sheet of paper, you should log every item you find in each location. And after they've completed listing these things, they should look for and highlight any patterns they noticed. And Those highlighted items then represent areas of passion that can be developed into topics for analysis. So let's just real quick take a look at the desk here, wherever you're at, or the space around you, or pick up your cell phone and do the camera or look at your photo album. And I was doing that, and my gosh, I didn't realize how many pictures of food I took and how many photos of recipes from magazines and doctors' offices and things that I had in my world that have to do with food and the production of food. But so let's just take, let's see, it's almost 7:20. Let's just take 3 minutes to go ahead and log the things around you. If we had nice background music, we could have that for 3 minutes, but we'll just have silence. Okay, take a look at your list, and then just, you may not have a highlighter with you, but you can circle those, any patterns that you see. So are there like items that surfaced more than 2 times, or at least 2 times? You can begin to see patterns develop into topics. This is a list that a student came up with and gave permission to the National Writing Project to use her list in her work. And she, you know, at first glance you think, well, this is not a big deal. A novel, a history text, folded with papers, planner, pencil, calculator, phone, headphones, glasses. Screenshot of quiz answers from BuzzFeed. And I should have looked BuzzFeed up. I'm not sure what that is. I've heard it. Pictures of her brother, Pokemon, food, flowers, friends, anime characters, raindrops, and Lego creations. And she began to see that, like Pokemon and anime and Lego, she began to see kind of a trend in that area based on all the stuff that she had around her. I want to read Grace's paragraph to you because she made such an amazing claim and then supported it with some really good justification. Fairy Tale completely changed my life for the better. I began watching it when I needed it the most. It altered my black and white thinking to a more open and understanding way of life. It gave me unique friendships that I wouldn't be able to find in everyday life and opened my mind to a whole new culture. Fairy Tale gave me hope when I thought there was none, and it gave me light every time I was in the dark. This was written by a 9th grader, and based on her claim that Fairy Tale completely changed her life for the better. And I just thought that was pretty fine. And it's a way to get to where kids live so that they can write about those things that really are important to them. And things that you might never in your wildest imagination select for them to write about that they could really connect well with. So that's one, I like that for that reason. My childhood passions came from a book called Beyond Literary Analysis. And I just thought this was in a chapter on making claims. And I just wanted to share this with you because I thought it was kind of a cool thing to do. Most of these things I'm sharing are generally junior high and up. So for you wonderful elementary teachers, I just rely on your capacity to look at this stuff and bring it down to your students or across to your students or to reduce it and make it something wonderful for your students. But under the childhood passions, you ask students to recall their passions. What did you want to be when you grew up? And you might just think about these at this moment. What were your favorite toys, games, or activities? What did you watch over and over and over again? I never missed The Lone Ranger. What did you enjoy pretending? What did you know everything about? What were your favorite childhood books? What were your favorite sections in the library? What did you like learning about from an older sibling or friend? And so from this list, students can highlight ideas that they still feel exciting to them years later as potential topics. And there could be, more than one. a student, his name is Andrew, looked at, when he finished these, he came on his list, some of his answers were that he loved watching baseball. He wanted to be an architect in preschool. He showed an interest in history since middle school. And he remembers good times playing baseball at the Little League. So when he wrote this really cool paper, and it's a paragraph. And a lot of times I think writing a really solid paragraph on a daily basis, as Mary pointed out last week, can be more empowering and generate more growth in writing than just having major papers. And then at some point, if you want a major paper, you go back and you pull out some of these topics that students pull out a topic to write about. But Andrew wrote, Chris Carpenter is one of the greatest pitchers in recent MLB history. If a freakish injury hadn't put such a sudden end to his career, in my mind, there is a chance, even though it is a small chance, that he would be in the Hall of Fame. While he wasn't like Cy Young or Nolan Ryan, he was still an extraordinary pitcher. During his 10 years of pitching for the St. Louis Cardinals, he played in 3 All-Star games and helped the Cardinals to win 2 World Series championships, and he also helped the Toronto Blue Jays to win 1 World Series during his time in Toronto. So a really nice paragraph with a great claim, an arguable claim, and then he went on to talk about and provide all of his justification for his claim. This is called the Quick List by the National Writing Project, and it's and I think it's a cool list. And I just thought maybe you could grab that piece of paper and flip it over that you've been writing on, and let's try this together. It's a shared writing experience where the teachers and the students write together, which is a very powerful thing to do with your students, and to create a list of possible writing topics. And quick list can be followed by quick writes. So we make a list in your notebooks from 1 to 10. And we know that we're going to ask students, and students should be planning on having to practice their own opinions, and we think of opinion learning topics. So on number 1 and 2, write 2 things you did yesterday. In 3 and 4, write things you like that others might not. And 5 and 6, you write 2 conversations that you've had recently. You don't have to write dialogue, but just some note that reminds you of that conversation, because it's 7 and 8, write 2 things you don't like that others do. And 9 and 10, write 2 things you don't think you could live without. And because this is a quick list, I think sometimes when you write things down quickly and you don't have a great deal of time to think about them, they have a little better level of honesty. And other times you really need to dig down. But this is one of those that is a quick list. And so after your students create this, you jump to a writing sprint. And they just pick one topic to write about quickly. So it's possible that, for instance, on Monday, you had them do the quick list, and the rest of the week, in the morning or when you had a few minutes left before the bell rings, they pull out their argument journal and they do a sprint write. They pick one of these topics and write as quickly as they can about it for a few moments. And in that process, they're going to be writing about making a claim and some justifications. And I think sometimes you could slow the sprint down a bit, and you might have a sentence frame from they say, I say on the board, or you might have had them copy a sentence frame down in their writing journal about how to write claims. And we did that once before on Second Life, but there's just a whole bundle of them in they say, I say. And so you might pick one out and say, okay, I want you to write about 2 things you don't like that others do, and I want you to make a claim about that and use the sentence frame and practice it so you can embed other instruction into this activity. Okay, this is the last activity we're going to kind of do today, but this is a good I think this is another one of those cool activities. So right now, if I haven't lost count, we have about 30 topics that touch students' lives that they could write about in their journal at this moment. So let's try this one. And so you could pick one or none of these and do something that could generate topics. But the good thing about these topics is this: digging down into the student to find out what they think and feel. And when they can write about that, their writing is so much better. And but so just take a moment to make a schedule of your day, and you don't have to do great detail, but just the things that happened during your day. It'll take 2 or 3 minutes to do this. Okay, the next step in this activity is for you to code the activities that you think are arguable in your life by putting a capital A at the end of them. So if you could debate, or it's arguable, or you could create an argument against getting up at 5:20 in the morning in your life, you would put an A there. If anything that you feel you could have an argument for or against. Most of these activities are also important because they help kids understand that there are arguments all around them, and they are making important decisions all the time, and most of the time without giving them real serious thought, because they don't deserve serious thought, but the reasoning is exactly the same as you would use for giving something that was abstract and important and clearly critical to your life. Trying to decide what shirt you're going to wear to school, plaid or stripes, and because you have an important presentation and you want to look good, or you're going to be riding the bus to some town to have a game and it's game day. All those are decisions that you make every day that can be justified. But so the activities that you can do with kids to help them begin to see that they have the tools, they have the intellectual tools. They just need to practice them, and you can practice them with VTS. You can practice them with these activities with writing attached to them, or you can find ways for kids to begin to see that there are arguments in their lives, and it's important that we practice the process because it touches everything. Okay, Ulat, if I could have the next slide, please. Okay, and this slide, this is what it might look like after coding. This slide has been coded, and wake up Jill, which is her daughter. So she thinks that could be an argument because she believes school starts too early, this parent, and that this came from a group of adults that I did this little workshop with. And she could make an argument for a later start date, and it would make her life easier, she thinks. And coffee, she just thinks that she could argue about the health benefits of teens and coffee every day, and the prevalence of coffee in kid culture. She could create some arguments around that. She moved on down, and she talked about picking her daughter up from tennis, and she was thinking about the importance of access to after-school sports. Not every child has access to after-school sports, and the impact of that, and so it's something she thought was an arguable point. And in eating dinner with the family, why it matters to eat family dinners. And then at 6:30 at night, taking her daughter to soccer practice, and she could throw out some argument about the pressure of organized sports. And then she watched in the evening that reality show Big Brother with her girls, and she thought we certainly could have an argument or make a claim and argue about reality TV and kids. So just from this schedule, she was able to find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 really strong topics to use as seeds for an argument paper. And if you were going to do something like this in your classroom, you could have them do this in their journals, and on Monday they could write a schedule encoded. On Tuesday they could develop claims. On Wednesday they could pick one of these and justify, find justifications for their position, at least 2 reasons. Thursday, you could have them write a paragraph, and you might even give them frames from they say, I say, for writing a claim and adding justifications, and even counterclaims if you wanted to. So, and then on Friday, you can publish it. And there are all kinds of electronic classroom publishing tools. And I think when we first met, we talked about Post-it as one of them. But there are just tons of different kinds of ways to publish. And or students you can take a few minutes and kids can read their papers aloud as a little speech, or they can have the teacher read them. They can put them on a 3x5 and post them on the bulletin board. And I think you remember when you do VTS and how much students really like to hear what other kids are saying and want to know what they're thinking. It's the same thing here. I think if you post and share out this information, that kids are always really intrigued by that. And then it becomes a seed for future papers if you want to write some future papers in for argumentation. Any questions so far? I've just been throwing this at you like crazy. Not too this week, sometime, Ulad brought to a meeting we were in a camera that had 360 degrees. You can take a picture, and it takes a picture 360 degrees. In other words, it's like you're standing in the middle of a globe, and it takes a picture of everything around you, behind you, above you, below you. You just hold the camera up in the air and take this picture, and you can take a still, or you can take a picture that is a video, and it's very cool. And I thought, because I wanted to share a little bit about some cool ways that you can take your kids to a museum and visit a 360 museum. The Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art has an amazing show on right now with Black history and culture. And when you get in, it's easier for me to use a mouse because I'm not as good on the finger pad, but your cursor, you move down the hallways of this museum. And if you're standing on a white dot, you'll be in front of a picture. And when you click on that picture, it fills the screen. And when I shared this with some teachers, they just went nuts because they said, oh my gosh, this is so vibrant. The visual is so perfect. It would be great for a VTS lesson. So I kind of wanted to leave you tonight with some kind of a nice piece of an art experience. Ulad has put up a link to the museum. And so if you click on that, Ulad, is this going to take a while to download? Because it did take a while on my computer. Right. Thank you, Emily. Yeah, the Natural History Museum in DC has this amazing 360 experience as well. The only thing about that particular museum and other museums that we visited, because we got so excited, teachers raced and started finding museums all over the country, is that sometimes you can't get the image to fill your screen. I don't know if it was super important, but I was just talking about how cool the Contemporary Art Museum in California was, because you're able to fill your entire screen. And so when we put it up, teachers put it, then it came up on their whiteboards, and it was fantastic. Hi, everyone. I guess I'm just having some real serious technology things tonight. So I just ran across the foyer, and I'm in Ulad's office. And but I just want to thank you for all the great feedback. Now, I agree, and I think it wouldn't be difficult if we could find ways to help teachers see how they could do that in their class without really taking away time from that is critical for their content area. And I think that's very possible to integrate argument and writing into content areas without disturbing or diminishing the focus of what's going on. Um, and you can do this just for a few minutes at the beginning of class, maybe not even 5 minutes for each one of these. I think that there are ways that we can give kids feedback and things they can look for in their writing, and keeping it really simple. For instance, maybe for the writing during 1 week, you've noticed a trend in something that they're all kind of missing out on, or most everyone, and then you can do a little mini lesson on that, and then tell them you expect to see that in all their writing. So regardless of what they're writing about, you're looking for that. And that's the one convention you're working on this week. Or maybe it's a literary element that you want them to put a certain literary element in their writing, or a certain sentence pattern. And that's all you're looking for in these quick writes, is that one thing. One thing I used to do is at the end of the class, when I had kids writing and I collected them, I just looked through them, and I would try to find lines that I thought were spectacular to share out. And you might think that the same student in your best writers would always have the most spectacular lines to share out, but over time, students, and I would never give out names. I'd say, if you want to claim this, you can, but I'm not putting out names here. And kids would, sometimes it was kind of cool, because a student who you might having the ability or whatever to write something just blow you out of your saddle, invariably will write something and you can share it out, and the rest of the class has this renewed respect for this student because they just never dreamt that that person could do something so beautiful.